The Bengals have finished their draft. Draft season is finally over. The roster is pretty much set in terms of what it's going to be. We recap that. Plus, how many games can the Cincinnati Reds lose? And we discuss NIL, and it's related to the Bearcats some. And I really want to discuss name, image, and likeness and how this conversation has really gotten out of control. The 3 a.m. Coney starts right now. Big welcome into the 3 a.m. Coney. Lukas Moore here. Matt and I will do another one of these this week. So plenty of Coney content coming your way. But it's a peak content season because we've got our final bit of new information to discuss as it relates to the Cincinnati Bengals. New information for the Reds to discuss every day, as in how many games have they lost and how many games will they lose this season. And it's not really new information. It's kind of information that I've seen coming for quite a long time, and I've even had Dr. David Ridpath on the show to discuss this issue of name, image, and likeness in the past, and how this was really predictable to happen to the NCAA. Now, the freak out that's happening now, I don't really understand, and we'll get into all that. But I want to start with the Cincinnati Bengals draft. I want to grade the draft pick by pick. In draft grades are difficult, especially when you're not really intimately familiar with everybody on the board. So I set out a goal on the show before this podcast for the Cincinnati Bengals in this draft. What my number one priority, if I were Duke Tobin, Zach Taylor, and the crew, would be. What my number one goal in terms of what I want players to be coming into the building. And that was culture fit. And I discussed how if you get the right type of guys around Joe Burrow, it'll probably work out. But they've got to be the right guys. So find guys who have athletic ceilings and who are made of the right stuff. Maybe their production grade wasn't the best. Maybe they play an awkward role, or you don't know how they're going to fit in. But you know they're going to work hard. You know they're going to come in prepared. You know they're smart. You know they love football. And that's what this draft was. It was full of guys that love football. Now, I think the biggest mistake, especially with the recent stories that have come out in the draft that's been made by the Bengals, was drafting the higher athletic upside guy that had maturity questions. And that was Jackson Carman. And what did he do? He came in out of shape. And I think that was the last time the Bengals were going to make a draft pick of saying, well, he'll come into our culture and then he'll grow within it. No, you got to find culture fits. You've got to find culture fits and guys that love football. Because if they love football, they're going to love Cincinnati. They're going to love the fans. They're going to love the city's attention to it. If they love football, they're going to love playing with Joe Burrow, being around Joe Burrow, experiencing everything that Joe Burrow can provide in terms of a culture and an attitude. And the same thing with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt and Jesse Bates on the back end and Trey Hendrickson. These guys are culture enhancers. And the more of those guys you can add, the better off you're going to be. And I think all 7 of these picks, quite frankly, check off the culture box for me. I check out Dane Brugler's The Beast. I'm a subscriber to The Athletic. I think that's it's a fantastic resource for off-field stuff. On-field stuff, if you want to use Pro Football Focus, sure, maybe that's better, easier to sort in terms of its online type of thing. But The Beast has the best personality descriptions and breakdowns. And you go pick by pick on this draft, and it's just positives on the personality. Whether the actions they did through high school, what they were in college, whether they were a team captain. You got Dax Hill as being the guy who's like this, who's even, steady, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, loves football, has never shown any drip of work ethic falling left or right. And in fact, his biggest critique in terms of his play style is that maybe he needs to play with more swagger. So walking into a locker room like the Bengals, that's a perfect fit. Cam Taylor-Britt, Zach Taylor's got all the connects from Nebraska, so personality-wise and work ethic, he checks all the boxes. He was a team captain at Nebraska. You go to Zachary Carter from Florida, 17 sacks in 24 games from the defensive tackle position. It's not bad, but if you look, he was SEC All-Community. They only pick one person per each SEC school to represent the Southeastern Conference for how much they are involved in their community. So that's 3 out of 3, your top 3 guys, the ones that are going to contribute the most, you make an argument, are all culture fits. You go to your 4th round pick, Cordell Volson, he might be the biggest culture pick there. Because out of North Dakota State, a national championship program where the standards are high, where the NFL hit rate is much higher than everybody else in the FCS, he could have gone to play for Wyoming, where Josh Allen went, in the FBS, but due to family reasons, he decided to play at FCS and at North Dakota State, and he ended up winning national championships and being an All-American type of player. So when you have these type of cultural fits combined with the level of talent that's there, and I tell you what, we're live on YouTube, and this cat just can't stop. But we have these cultural fits time and time again, and when they fit the culture and they have talent, they tend to maximize that talent. So you look at each of these guys' profiles, and you can project more towards the ceiling than the floor of whatever your projection is. And Cordell Volson, his ceiling is a starter this year in the NFL because he's got experience, he's got smarts, he ran in a wide zone run system, so he's going to be able to plug and play as a run blocker. Will he be able to plug and play as a pass blocker? I don't know. Jackson Carman is a better athlete in terms of upper end athleticism, but I think Cordell Volson will pick everything up faster. So that puts pressure on Jackson Carman not to just be more athletic, but to be a better pro, which he just wasn't this year. He just wasn't. And he came along as the year went along, but if you came in out of shape, hey, but that might have been the difference in the 1 seed this year. Jackson Carman being in shape or not coming into the building. So making that cultural pick last year, which was a guy with maturity issues, that was a mistake, and the Bengals didn't make it again. And if I had to make a prediction, I'd say Volson is going to end up being the starting left guard on this team. Is that necessarily a great thing? I don't know. But I just think when you look at this guy, 21 points, 15 rebounds in high school basketball, played all over the offensive line in his time at North Dakota State. I mean, all-time character guy. You look at Tyson Anderson, he had almost every single teammate of his from Toledo at his draft party. He was a guy that all over the community in Toledo. So the right guy, made of the right type of stuff. And, you know, you start to get into 6th, 7th round picks. I mean, are we really going to think that these guys are going to contribute out of the 6th and 7th round? He's not even a 6th rounder. We only have the 7th rounder in Jeffrey Gunter, who, again, you look at his background, maybe not the personality explode, wow, this guy's a great culture fit, but you don't have any red flags. And, you know, you've got a couple, hey, hardworking, Coastal Carolina to be able to make it to the NFL after being turned down by North Carolina State in the FBS. I think that's a really good profile for a successful NFL player. A lot of these guys, not highly recruited. Dax Hill was. Dax Hill was the only really massively highly recruited player in the class, and I like those players for NFL success because to make it in the NFL, it's not easy. And you've got to be used to it not being easy. And I think that every single one of these players has had to grind to get to where they're at. And that's the type of players you're looking for when you're not drafting in the top 5 of a draft. When you're drafting in the top 5 of a draft, that's where you look for bona fide talent. This guy's going to come in and be an all-pro player, and if he's got character concerns, we'll iron him out, if it's a wide receiver or something. But when you're drafting in the 30s, and then you're looking for 2nd, 3rd round picks, you need guys that can come in tomorrow, be professionals, be a part of your program, and improve not just themselves, but everybody else in the room. And I think that's what's so great about these draft picks is that it will improve each room they walk into because you know they're going to be professional and you know they're going to be high culture guys. So when you know that, they come into the room, pros, ready to roll, even if they aren't as athletically talented as your current starters. Those starters are going to need to cross their T's and dot their I's. Eli Apple is going to need to come in focused for camp. And he knows that because Cam Taylor-Britt is going to be a team captain out of Nebraska, breathing down his neck, ready to prove himself and ready to take his starting role. Same thing with Jesse Bates and Von Bell. They know that, hey, man, you got to come in and participate in camp, and you've got to be a guy. And I'm not worried about these guys doing it at all. But when you've got that extra pressure of competition, it's always, always good for the room. And it's in rooms that need it a little bit. I'd say the secondary and the offensive line were the 2 biggest weaknesses for the Bengals last year. When you look at the secondary depth and how many times elite quarterbacks tore them up or non-elite quarterbacks in Mike White, I think secondary depth, offensive line, if you go all the way to the start of the offseason, and a little more pass rush, maybe. But even then, I think it's still a better unit than a lot of Bengals Twitter gives it credit for. But how much of it's coverage? Yeah, it's all difficult questions. But I think they improved each room in the draft. In terms of the positions they drafted, they improved those rooms in terms of the competition in them. And there might not be any rookie starters, and that's okay. Go look at Super Bowl champions. Not a lot of rookie starters. Maybe one or two. It was pretty rare for Jamar Chase to be that significantly contributing rookie and be a part of a team that almost won the Super Bowl. So it's better to not have rookies throughout your lineup. It's better for them to be depth pieces for guys that challenge the room, for guys who are pushing for starting jobs 2 years from now instead of this year. Although I think Dax Hill will make this defense more variable. I think Cam Taylor-Britt has a chance to make this defense better. Same thing with Zachary Carter. I think all four guys can end up making starts this year and being good contributing players. If you count Volson, the top four picks. And I think Tyson Anderson's going to be a hell of a special teamer. So I just think they got guys that can contribute to the 2022 team with somewhat of an eye towards the future. Did they get an edge that's going to get 300 to 400 snaps and 6 or 6.5 sacks? Did they get somebody that's going to provide a boatload of production? No, they didn't. But I don't think that makes this a bad draft. I think they drafted for what their culture is and what it needed. And that's what I asked in the show before. Just draft culture guys. And that's what they did. And they might have reached in some areas for that cultural fit. But I think that's the most important thing for development in the NFL, especially when the talent gaps are like this. And we talked about that. When the gaps are like this, it's so much more important to have those guys that fit into your culture. And I think the Bengals did that. I think it was a goal, and they succeeded in that goal in the draft. I love it. I like it. It's hard to love a draft where you don't have any top 15 picks because you don't feel like you're adding an all-pro player. You're adding guys who maybe could be all-pros. But I love the athleticism of Taylor-Britt and Dax Hill. He says he wants to be called Dax, so that's what we got to call him. Dax and Cam, I think they're going to be starters in the secondary next year. I think they will earn starts this year, and I think they'll be productive players that rotate in. And you'll see them a bunch, and they'll make plays, and they'll make the secondary better, and they give the defense an opportunity to where if Joseph Osai hits and can provide that 6.5, 7 sack number as the rotational edge rusher, then it's a top 8 defense, top 5 defense. Because I think Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are going to take leaps again. And you got a lot of guys approaching contract years. You have a defense whose oldest player will be 28, and that player is DJ Reader, who's the best player on the defense. So he's entering his prime. The best players, most highest paid players on the defense are entering their prime. And you're bringing in these super athletic young guys who do not have to play major roles. And that is just the formula for a really special turnover-making, playmaking defense. And I think that's what the Bengals have put together. And that's why I give the draft a B+. A B+. It's hard to get better than a B+ when you're drafting at the end of the first round and you only pick 6 players. Right? So we'll see what the undrafted free agent situation is. If they got a better crop than they normally get because they were a team that made the Super Bowl, we'll see if I'm not going to go through all the undrafted free agents. These guys got to perform in the preseason before we even talk about them. But there's guys in there that can maybe punt return or be contributors on this team. I think the Bengals roster is pretty well set. Run through the starters off the top of my head. Let's see if I can do this. Quarterback, Joe Burrow. I think that's a top 5 player. Bona fide. Lock it in. Joe Burrow, top 5 player. I won't have the arguments. I think he would be number 1 on my list going into next year, but top 5 quarterback in the league, no question about it. Joe Mixon, top 10 running back in the league, no question about it. I think with a better offensive line, he's going to be in the top 5 as well this year. Wide receiving core is the best wide receiver core in the league. T. Higgins would have had 1,300 yards in 16 games. He was incredible. Jamar Chase had 1,400. They're both 22 and 23 years old, so that feels like it's only going to get better. I think it's the best wide receiving core in the league. And frankly, other than the Rams, I just don't see another wide receiving core being close to the Cincinnati Bengals. And you haven't even mentioned Tyler Boyd, who's been a Pro Bowl player in his career. Tight end room, I think Hayden Hurst, because of all the other pieces on the offense, Hayden Hurst is just going to be wide open all the time, and he's fast as hell. So I think he's going to be really productive. I think he is just plot him in, league average tight end. Maybe not league average run blocking tight end, but you have Drew Sample from that who can mix it in there. Hayden Hurst is not a negative or a positive on this team. He's just a really fast, And I think fantasy-wise, he can be a top 10 tight end for sure. In terms of talent in the league, you'd place him right around that 15 to 18 range-ish. I would say that's where he'll end up this year. Offensive line to me is going to be a top 15 unit guaranteed. If everybody stays healthy and you have some luck in that area, I think it's a top 10 unit with Lyle Collins, with Alex Kappa, with Ted Karras, with Volson ends up starting, with Jonah Williams entering a very important part of his career. He just got his 5th-year option extended to him, but this is a really important part of Jonah's career to become a bona fide paid left tackle in the NFL. So you go to the defensive line. I think the defensive line is a top 15 unit minimum, probably a top 12-ish unit, 14-ish, but sure, top 15 if you say they don't have the depth, if you don't believe in Osai. Linebacking unit, I think they're going to make a jump up into the top 10 because I really do believe in Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt to that level. I think that them elevating their performance was a huge reason the defense was able to take a step in the playoffs, and I think more security on the back end, more versatility where those guys they aren't as relied as much in coverage. And I think they can take a jump. And just look at their age. They're at the age to take a jump in the league, and I think that they're going to be a top 10 unit at the linebacking position. And you look at the corners, Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton were 2 of the top corners in the league last year, according to Pro Football Focus. They're also at ages where they can get better. Then you draft 3 high-level athletes in the secondary to add to that unit. When you already have a borderline all-pro free safety in Jesse Bates and a former Pro Bowler strong safety in Von Bell, you've got a lot of metrics that say the safety room is the best in the league and the cornerback is above average. So I'd say your cornerback room is right at league average, 15th. Depending on how good Cam Taylor-Britt is, it could get into the top 10 with Hilton, Awuzie, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Eli Apple, who is not great, but not horrendous either, as your 4th corner, with Dax Hill mixing in there, getting some snaps at the rotational safety position. Like that's a top 15 room, and it's probably the best safety room or one of the best 5 safety rooms in the league right now. So those are all your positions on the team. Your kicker's top 2, right behind Justin Tucker. Punter's bad, but whatever, it's the punter. Where's the hole? Where's the weakness? Where's the area where they got worse? Where's the area where you don't expect improvement in terms of the players' ages and in terms of how positions improve in NFL history? The only way you can make an argument against the Cincinnati Bengals is some cockamamie idea that Super Bowl hangovers are a real thing and not just a pattern that happens to happen. Like, sure, if that's your argument, that losing in the Super Bowl is more punitive than losing 38-6 in the divisional round to the Detroit Lions, which the Dallas Cowboys did before they won back-to-back Super Bowls. But sure, if you want to make that argument that losing a Super Bowl is more punitive in terms of whatever, mentality or luck or, I don't know, the sports gods, whatever you want to say, if you want to pretend that's more punitive than a blowout loss in the divisional round to the Lions, their last playoff win, then be my guest. But the Cowboys, after that embarrassing moment, won back-to-back Super Bowls. We also have a Super Bowl loser that came back and won the Super Bowl the next year. That happened recently in the New England Patriots. And I know the whole NFL takes every Patriot accomplishment and puts it in another bucket. Well, it's just the Patriots. You can't replicate that. But if you look at all the Super Bowl losers from the past, they're all been good teams the year after. You have to go back to the Carolina Panthers, who had Cam Newton as the MVP, who pouted off the stage after they lost the Super Bowl. It was really embarrassing post-game performance from him, and whose roster hit like a peak in terms of age. They didn't turn it over well. They were aging, and the roster fell off, and they had 6 wins. That's the last time a Super Bowl loser has really just plummeted off the table. You even look at the Atlanta Falcons. After they blow a 28-3 lead, they made the playoffs the next year. And they, again, were an aging roster at the time. So I just I'm not worried about that crap at all. Now, this is my final thought on the Bengals. I think that they can win the Super Bowl in 2022. I think that Super Bowl 57 can be theirs, without a doubt. I think they're one of the top 3 Super Bowl contenders in the league in my mind. I think if you're going to rate 4, I think it's Bills, Bengals, Bucks, Rams. Bills, Bengals, Bucks, Rams, if I had to put it that way. And again, that's going to change as we move throughout. We'll see how preseason goes and the reports of rookies and all those good things. But those are my 4. I think that those teams have the most depth. They have the most positional versatility. They have elite quarterback play. I think Broncos you could maybe toss in there too after all the moves we've seen, although I'd like to just see a couple reports from training camp that it's going well, which I'm sure it will be going well. So in my eyes, the Cincinnati Bengals can win the Super Bowl this year. But this is the last time we need to talk about it. This is the last time we need to talk about it. Because you cannot spend an entire season thinking about the Super Bowl. You just can't. This is the NFL. It is an extremely, extremely hard league to win every week. Even when you play the Lions, who are coming off a tough road game, you're playing the Lions who are short rested and are missing half their starters. That's still a tough game. You still have to execute. You still have to do everything in your power to ensure success week by week in this league. It is a hard league. And it is unfair for us as fans for every single game, every single week to talk about the Super Bowl. Because this team's regular season success will not be connected to its postseason success. And if anything has taught us that, it's what just happened. Because this team that we just had that was a minute 30 away from winning the whole damn thing was not good enough in the regular season to get to that point. They became good enough. They developed that throughout the season. They went through the grind. They improved. They reached that point. It's a journey. And you got to get lucky in the playoffs. Should not have beaten the Tennessee Titans. Any Bengals fan that is trying to delude themselves, like, there's no way in hell you should have won that game against Tennessee if you're Cincinnati. No way in hell that we should have been celebrating after that one. In fact, I sat right here on my living room floor and I looked at Jess and I said, we should not have won that game. No way. No way we should have won that game. The Chiefs game, you can make an argument they shouldn't have won that game either. Now, I think much more than the Tennessee game in terms of the way the offense played and just the flow of it and how they were in the Chiefs' head. I think that's more legitimate than the Titans game. But getting sacked 9 times, scoring 19 points, that's not a way to win. And Ryan Tannehill really throwing you a couple balls. Like that's where this team's journey should end, is in the divisional round, but it didn't because it's the playoffs. That can happen to this team, except it's on the other side. They're 15-2. They're great. They lose in the divisional round. And then we feel like we wasted an entire year focusing on the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is not until February 2023. You know what the championship we all should be seeking as fans? The championship that we all should be lamenting for, that we should be talking to players about. When you tweet at them or whatever you do, you shouldn't say, hey, go win the Super Bowl this year. No, it's go win the division. Go win the division. Take all these Ravens fans and all these Steelers fans and all these Browns fans who have done nothing but try to delegitimize the accomplishment of the Cincinnati Bengals, and for 6 games, you shove it down their throat. And you prove one game at a time in the division and against the Chiefs and against the Bills at home in the AFC, both those games at home, you prove one game at a time that they made a grave mistake ever thinking that they could repeat what you did. A grave mistake thinking that they can compete with what you are. That's what this season's about. It's not about the Super Bowl in February, where the Bengals are going to need to catch bounces and injury luck and a million other things to get there. And then, as we've just seen in the game, and if you go back and watch Super Bowl 16 and 23, you need some luck in the damn game to win it. So don't spend all year thinking about that. Spend all summer thinking about the Baltimore Ravens. Spend all summer thinking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their shiny new quarterback. Spend all summer thinking about the Cleveland Browns. And if you do that as the Cincinnati Bengals, and if we help contribute to that as fans, where today is the last day we stop it. We say, yes, they're a team that can win the Super Bowl, but honestly, I'm more worried about the AFC North. I think that is what's going to be better for Bengaldom, for all of us, for the fans, for the players, for the coaches, for the front office, for the social media team. It's about the North. I'm not worried about the Chiefs or the Bills until they come into the building and it's a chance to prove it. But you got to worry about the AFC North and prove that you do, in fact, belong. All right, how many games can the Reds lose? We'll get into that topic, and then we'll touch quickly on NIL, and then we'll get out of here. The Reds aren't going to end up losing like 140 games or something. I'm seeing that out there. If we remember, after they started 3-18 back with Brian Price, they went 35-25 over a stretch that shortly followed that, from like May to June or something like that. So I think that's going to happen with this team. They're going to have a stretch where there are 10 games above 500 because it's baseball, because some of these guys are going to get hot. They're not just going to be cold all year. There's too many games. It's going to get into the dog days. Teams are going to overlook them, and they're going to steal wins, and they're going to be cobbling it around 500 for a while. And I think I still think they can be a 90-loss team, not a 100-loss team. Although if I had to predict right now, I'd say 104, just because they might sell more at the trade deadline. Might as well lean into it if you're ownership, right? So I think they'll be a 98 to 102-loss team. I don't think they're going to lose 120 games or 130 games or anything like that. And I'm hyperly critical of the Reds, but I think that's just a little crazy. This thing's just gone off the rails. Once it gets back on the track, they can sit around of being a 500 team or whatever. But we need to avoid what will happen, which is they're going to go on that stretch where they're 10 games above 500 or whatever, and there's going to be a big push from the propaganda machine that exists around the Cincinnati Reds, which has only had a few cracks in it recently after the owner literally told the fans to go F themselves in a different way of words, but that's essentially what he said to everybody. That's the only thing that's kind of broken the propaganda train that's existed around the Reds since 2012. I have never read the coverage around a team, and I think I read, I live here in Chicago, so I stay up to date on the beat writers of the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bears, a little bit of Bulls, and then all the Cincinnati teams. And then from the time lived in Michigan, read a lot of Detroit stuff. So I've seen a lot of beat reporters and how they cover the team. I went to journalism school, so I've read a whole bunch and experienced a whole bunch of how reporters cover teams. And there is no reporting group or base that I have met. I met a couple of them, but like read or experienced seasons with, that is more unrealistically positive and unrealistically defending of management than the Reds writing room. It is the most protective reporting group I've ever seen. From the blogs to the Twitter pages to the writers themselves, it is highly protective of the front office. And it took 3-19 for there to be a lot of you that are hypercritical. Because what we're all forgetting is that all these people that are going to come out and be hypercritical were defending some of the moves that Nick Kroll made just before the season. Talking about how, look at the projections, 82 to 80 whatever wins, and they'll be fine. And they actually had to do this, and it actually wasn't that dumb to trade Jesse Winker, and it actually wasn't that dumb to do this. It actually wasn't that dumb to do this. And you know how many times I've been told by Reds beat writers that a move that I thought was dumb, that a lot of Reds fans thought was dumb, then I have to sit down and read an article where you tell us how we're dumb for thinking that move was dumb, and then that move ends up not panning out, just like everybody said it did. I mean, it has been constant. They defended the Homer Bailey decision over Johnny Cueto. They defended trading Jay Bruce. They defended moving Aroldis Chapman. They defended putting Aroldis Chapman in as a closer. I can go through all the early 2010s. All the early 2010s. There are numerous moves that should have been questioned that weren't. And I don't know whether it's because they wanted the last ownership group out so bad and they're just trying to, be nice to the Castellinis or whatever, but it's got to stop. Because if you look at the coverage of the Bengals, the other team in town, compared to the nice coverage of the Reds, you would think it's two different cities, the way those two teams are covered. So I'm really hoping that that's changed and there's more accountability from the Cincinnati Reds and those who cover them, because it's inexcusable that we even were trying to talk ourselves into this being an 81 team. We're trying to, actually, Nick Kroll makes a point. And I think the writers would still be defending this team. Had Phil Castellini not shoved his foot all the way into his trachea, but that's exactly what happened. And that's why they're in a tough position now because, there were a lot of loyal Reds fans and those guys are gone now. Not with this ownership group. There's not really many loyal Reds fans left in terms of, I'll stick with ownership or management, whatever decision they make, because I think they're doing the best for the team. All right, final topic on the show. We switched to NIL. Now, my specialization when I went to college was sports administration, and I took a lot of classes and lectures and things on collegiate athletics, and this was in the pre-NIL era. And one of my professors is Dr. David Ridpath, one of the country's leaders on this topic of trying to get name, image, and likeness rights for athletes. Wrote a couple books on the subject, has been one of the leaders in trying to gain athletes' rights. As Sunshine interrupts again, this is the last time she's out here for a podcast, I'll tell you that. But anyway, as the cat believes she has the right to the microphone, let's get you out of here. But name, image, likeness is one of those topics that is not really difficult for me and hasn't really been difficult for me because it's common sense and like American right to make money off of yourself. Duh. It doesn't matter if you go to school. I mean, the arguments for this have been ridiculous and nonsensical. And what I want to say to people that disagree with name, image, and likeness and don't think it should exist or think it should have extreme guardrails or regulations, I want to tell you, because the political leanings of a lot of these people is one certain way. Now, I'm not saying it's true across the board. But if you are against name, image, and likeness being completely open and free, you're just anti-capitalist. Because what's happening right now is just capitalism. It's people who are not under contract, who are moving school to school to acquire more money and more opportunity for themselves. What about that is wrong? Well, it's not fair to the coaches who move around whenever they want and take all the money, or the athletic directors who move around whenever they want or take all the money, or the professors who move around whenever they want and take all the money, or the trainers or strength coaches or assistant coaches or film guys or GAs or everybody else involved in the whole damn thing moves around whenever they want and takes all the money. So why can't the players? Doesn't make any sense. It's completely anti-capitalistic. And it's a shame because American sports, despite America being this, hub of capitalism and the center of capitalism in the world, its sports systems up and down the board are the most socialist in the world. The NFL is the most socialist league in terms of fairness towards all, equality towards all, balance towards all sports league in the world. All the teams make almost the same amount of money, because it's split directly evenly from the NFL revenue. Nobody gets relegated up and down. Teams are capped hard to have the same amount of payroll. That's why a team like the Bengals can be so high on payroll every year in the league, despite not actually bringing in that much revenue at their gate. So you've got this league that's just strictly socialist, and that doesn't exist everywhere in the world. Right? Manchester City and all these, they have to do budgets and it's revenue and it's up and down and it's relegation. And if you suck, you fail. That's it. There's no protection. There's no bailouts. There's no Major League Baseball buying the Tampa Bay Rays to save them. There's none of that happens in sports overseas. And so I think we're kind of used to like leagues creating anti-capitalistic rules to kind of make the leagues more fair and better for fans. And I think that's really worked at the professional level. And the reason I have no problem with it at the professional level is because you're paying the players. So it doesn't matter. If guys are getting cut a $3 million check, I could care less whether they're getting traded to a city their family doesn't want to live in. Because I can look at that person and go, well, buddy, if you want to make a couple $1 million playing football, that's just kind of what it is. But you cannot do that to these kids who have restricted freedoms compared to every other American group until this NIL decision went down. And I had been saying, and Dr. Ridpath had been saying, and a lot of people have been saying, that the NCAA needed to get in front of this themselves instead of letting it go through the court, because anybody who has any sense with American law would look at this situation back in 2015 and go, well, that's definitely illegal. And the courts are going to strike that down because a kid can make a YouTube channel and be a biology major and make six figures a year commenting on video games. But this guy who's got to rearrange his whole schedule, limits the majors that he can choose, limits the classes he can take, works more than most Americans work, cannot get paid in any sense, or they lose their position. It doesn't make, like, think about it from a legal perspective. Now, any social studies class or whatever you took, there is no way on this earth would anything like this ever last a long time in this country. So the NCAA had an opportunity to get together, to be a real league, to own up to what it is, to make guardrails and rules before the courts struck it down so that they controlled the rollout of name, image, and likeness freedom instead of the U.S. court system controlling it. And that's on the NCAA. It is not on these athletes. It is not on these programs. It is not on these coaches. It is on the NCAA. They are the most fraudulent and incompetent sports organization on earth. And FIFA is in the running for that award. FIFA is in the running. FIFA that's had the FBI break down their doors and flip desks in their office. The NCAA is right up there with them in terms of most fraudulent and inept sports organizations on this earth. And so it's on them. And I have no care or worry for them. And college football is going to be fine. You're all going to watch. Those kids are going to get paid. The kids will move schools. You'll watch again next year. Kid will get paid. Nobody will care. Economic benefit for those at the bottom. And all the other things that are brought up, well, it's not really fair to the small programs, or it's not this or not that. Well, capitalism's not fair. And if you wanted to make it fair, then you should have made rules yourself and not fought the thing tooth and nail all the way to the Supreme Court. So, this was a long time coming. All these problems, all these things we saw coming, we knew would happen, and yet we knew that it had to happen because what was happening was illegal and a crime that had happened for 50, 60 years. And it's coming to high school too, because there's no reason that a 16-year-old shouldn't make money off of his football ability either. Because this is the United States of America. You're allowed to make money however damn well you can make money as long as it doesn't break the law. And last time I checked, being a great free safety isn't against the law. Having a big Twitter following isn't against the law. So all of these, I'm so worried about the soul of college football because kids are making money. Chill. That's the market. It's capitalism. And guess what? It'll figure itself out. How long are boosters going to overpay for these players that don't actually end up being that good at their school anyway? You think that's going to happen for 20 years? You think they're going to be cutting kids $8 million checks for 20 years? I don't think so. I think you're going to have 2 or 3 players that don't pan out, that you spent $9 million on, that didn't use the money right, that were immature, that were all the examples of why you don't give a kid that age all that money. And they'll be like, you know what? Why don't we stop doing that? Let the system play out. Let it play out. And I guarantee you this, kids being able to make ad dollars does not help the bigger schools. Because do you think Alabama is really going to be able to get $4 million to a third string running back? But you tell that running back, hey, if you come down to the ACC and you rush for 2,000 yards, you'll make a lot of NIL money just from your success. That's where this thing is going. Don't let the initial wild, wild west of it, where everybody's trying to figure it out, make us somehow go backwards on this issue when the Supreme Court finally figured it out because the NCAA refused to. And don't be surprised about all this happening. Everybody that followed this issue knew all of this was coming, and the fact that it's being made such a big deal is insane to me. It's freedom, it's capitalism, and, go ahead and comment all the things you want about how it ruins college sports, because I guarantee it doesn't. I guarantee ratings will go up next year. And I think high school football, if those players started making name, image, and likeness money, I bet it would get more popular too. I don't think it'd get less popular because now kids are making money. Now, what's the moral qualms of that? Well, you probably shouldn't have school and sports connected to begin with. We're the only major country on earth that does that. But whatever, it's connected. So yeah, a kid is going to be taking a social studies class at 17, walk out on the football field where he's making six figures because he's popular on Twitter. And is that the worst thing in the world? No. Is it the best thing for the kid? Probably not. But that's not on us. That's on them and their parents. So that's where I stand on all that stuff. I want to thank everybody for such a great show and for dealing with the constant background cat and on all those wonderful things. I thought the Bengals had a B+ draft. I thought it was very good. You had the culture, maybe you reach, maybe you could have got different talented guys, but it definitely met the goals that I wanted for this team and this organization to hit in this draft. So, ton of fun. Thank you so much for watching. Sunshine, you want to say bye since you've been so involved? No, she doesn't want to say bye now. I appreciate all of you for watching, for listening. This has been the 3 a.m. Coney. We will see you next time.